New blood at Nexus Academy. The artificial sunrise began its slow crawl across the observation deck of Harmony 7, the massive space station that housed the galaxy's most prestigious military academy. Maya Rodriguez pressed her palm against the cool, transparisteel window, watching distant stars wheel past as the station rotated on its axis. 3 months since her arrival, and she still couldn't quite believe she was here. Nexus Academy had been accepting cadets from across the Galactic Coalition for over 2 centuries, but humans had only been eligible for the past 5 years. Maya was part of the 3rd human class ever admitted, one of only 8 selected from Earth's outer colonies. The pressure was immense, but she'd grown up with pressure. On asteroid base Kepler 442c, pressure was what kept you alive. The corridor behind her filled with the familiar sounds of morning assembly. Heavy footfalls of Kralian warrior caste cadets shook the deck plating, while the whispered conversations of Vorthic twins created an eerie harmony that always made her skin crawl. The academy housed representatives from 47 different species, each bringing their own advantages, prejudices, and expectations. Maya shouldered her equipment pack and headed toward Engineering Lab 7. Her specialty was resource optimization and battlefield engineering, skills honed during years of helping her parents extract precious metals from the most inhospitable rocks in space. While other cadets had grown up with military traditions and formal combat training, Maya had learned to survive by making something from nothing, by seeing solutions where others saw only problems. "Watch where you're walking, dirt grubber," growled a voice that made Maya's jaw tighten. Thorak, a mountain of scaled muscle, standing nearly 3 meters tall, stepped directly into her path. His crest flared with the bright red patterns that indicated barely controlled aggression in Kralian physiology. Behind him stood his constant companions, Zix and Nex, Vorthic twins, whose 4 arms and serpentine lower bodies made them formidable. Opponents, and Krell, whose heavy world heritage gave him bones like titanium and muscles dense as granite. Maya had encountered this group before. They represented the old guard at Nexus Academy, cadets from species with long military traditions who viewed humans as an unwelcome novelty. To them, she wasn't just an outsider. She was a symbol of the Coalition's misguided inclusivity policies. "Excuse me," Maya said evenly, attempting to step around the Kralian. His massive hand slammed against the wall, blocking her path. "I said watch where you're walking," Thorak repeated, his translator struggling with the subsonic growls that peppered his speech. "My people have been warriors for 10,000 years. We've conquered systems and brought order to chaos. What have humans done? Scratched around in the dirt of one insignificant world." "Actually," Maya replied, her voice calm despite the adrenaline beginning to flow through her system, "humans have been spacefaring for over 3 centuries. We've established colonies on 47 different worlds and contributed significantly to Coalition technology, particularly in resource extraction and environmental adaptation." Zix and Nex hissed in unison, their quad vocal cords creating an unsettling harmony. "Listen to it recite propaganda," Zix sneered, "as if memorizing statistics makes up for evolutionary inadequacy." "The human thinks it's clever," added Nex, her tail lashing behind her. "But cleverness means nothing when survival depends on strength." Krell remained silent, but his small, predatory eyes never left Maya's face. Among his people, silence often preceded violence. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Vix High, a Zentarian whose authority was absolute within the Academy's walls. Her crystalline carapace caught the corridor lighting and split it into rainbow patterns that covered the nearby walls. "Is there a problem here, cadets?" she asked, her voice carrying the natural harmonic frequencies that made Zentarian speech impossible to ignore. "No problem, Commander," Thorak rumbled, but he didn't move his arm from the wall. just having a friendly discussion about species capabilities. Commander Vex-High's multifaceted eyes fixed on each cadet in turn. Then I suggest you continue this discussion in your respective training modules. Combat efficiency evaluation begins in 10 minutes. As the group dispersed, Maya caught Thorax's whispered promise. This isn't over, dirt grubber. Soon you'll learn your place. Engineering. Lab 7 buzzed with activity as cadets prepared for the day's evaluation. The combat efficiency test was a comprehensive simulation that measured not just fighting ability, but tactical thinking, resource management, and adaptability under pressure. Maya had been studying the simulation parameters for weeks, noting patterns that others had missed. The testing chamber was a marvel of holographic technology, capable of creating any battlefield environment imaginable. Today's scenario was a damaged space station with failing life support, hostile boarding parties, and limited resources. Each cadet would face the same basic situation, but the simulation would adapt based on their species' natural abilities. And training background. Maya was the 43rd cadet to enter the chamber. By now, she had observed enough attempts to understand the simulation's preferred solutions. Most cadets relied on direct confrontation, using superior firepower or physical capabilities to eliminate threats. The highest scores went to those who combined violence with tactical awareness, like Thorak, who had set a new academy record just 2 hours earlier. But Maya saw something different. She saw a puzzle that could be solved without firing a single shot. The simulation began with Maya materializing in a damaged corridor, emergency lighting casting everything in hellish red shadows. Her heads-up display showed multiple hostiles approaching from 3 directions, life support failing throughout the station, and only basic equipment available: a standard pulse rifle, a repair kit, and an emergency beacon. Most cadets would have immediately sought defensive positions and prepared for combat. Instead, Maya sprinted toward the nearest maintenance hatch. The simulation's AI watched in apparent confusion as she bypassed the approaching hostiles and dove into the station's service tunnels. Using her mining background, Maya quickly located the primary power distribution center. The hostile forces were using electromagnetic scramblers to disrupt station systems, but they had made a critical error. They assumed their targets would think like warriors, not engineers. Working with the speed and precision learned in asteroid mining operations, Maya rerouted power from non-essential systems, creating a cascade failure that would appear accidental to the hostiles, but actually isolated their equipment from the station's power grid. Without their scramblers, the station's automated defense systems came back online. But Maya wasn't finished. She had noticed that the hostile forces were using predictable patrol patterns, following standard military doctrine. Using the maintenance tunnels, she began placing small charges from her repair kit at structural weak points, not to collapse the station, but to create acoustic interference that would mask her movements. The simulation's climax came when Maya emerged behind the main hostile force, just as the station's defense systems reactivated. In the confusion, she used the emergency beacon not to call for rescue, but to broadcast a false evacuation signal that caused the hostiles to retreat to their insertion point, where she had quietly sabotaged their escape pods. Total simulation time: 14 minutes, 37 seconds. Hostiles neutralized without direct engagement. Station saved with minimal damage. 0 casualties. The chamber fell silent as Maya's scores appeared on the main display. Not just a new record, but a result so far beyond previous attempts that the testing system initially flagged it as a computational error. Maya stepped out of the simulation chamber to find every cadet in the lab staring at her. In the back, she could see Thorax's crest flaring darker shades of red, and the way Zix and Nex coiled around each other suggested barely contained fury. Commander Vex-High approached, her expression unreadable. "Cadet Rodriguez, Please explain. Your tactical approach. I observed that most solutions focused on defeating the hostiles through superior force, Maya replied. But the simulation's real challenge wasn't combat efficiency. It was resource optimization under time pressure. The hostiles weren't the primary threat. The failing station was. And your decision to avoid direct confrontation? In asteroid mining, the most dangerous thing you can do is assume you're the strongest element in the equation. Space doesn't care about your combat training or your species' warrior traditions. It kills you just the same. So you learn to work with the environment instead of fighting it. Commander Vexhi's carapace shifted to deeper blues, a sign of thoughtful consideration in her species. An unusual perspective, and effective. As the lab session ended, Maya gathered her equipment, acutely aware of the hostile stares following. Her movements. She had not just succeeded. She had made the rest of them look primitive by comparison. In a culture that valued military prowess above all else, that was a dangerous thing to do. Asterisk. The corridor seemed unusually empty as Maya made her way back to her quarters. Most cadets would be in the recreation areas by now, sharing meals and building the social bonds that were as important as military training for future officers. But Maya had never been invited to join these gatherings. Her presence seemed to make other cadets uncomfortable, a reminder that the galaxy was changing in ways they didn't fully understand. She was passing through Maintenance Section D when she realized she was being followed. The section was normally deserted during evening hours, its primary function being storage for atmospheric recycling equipment. The perfect place for a private conversation. Maya's mining instincts kicked in as she analyzed her situation. Limited exit routes, no surveillance in this section, and the constant background hum of life support systems that would mask sounds. If someone wanted to send a message without official interference, this would be the place to do it. She kept walking, her pace steady, but her mind was already working through possibilities. Behind her, she could hear the distinctive footfall patterns of 4 different species. Thorax's heavy steps, the Vorthic twins' slithering movement, and Krell's careful predatory padding. They weren't trying to hide their approach. They wanted her to know they were coming. Maya's hand moved casually to her tool belt, fingers brushing against the mining tools she carried out of habit. Most cadets saw them as primitive relics, but Maya knew their true value. A plasma cutter designed to slice through asteroid rock could do interesting things to biological targets. A gravitational stabilizer could turn a simple piece of equipment into a devastating projectile weapon. The corridor ahead opened into a wider maintenance bay, surrounded by massive atmospheric processors that created a maze of pipes, conduits, and machinery. Multiple exits, plenty of cover, and environmental hazards that could be turned to advantage. If they planned to corner her, they had chosen poorly. Maya stepped into the maintenance bay and turned around. No point in pretending. She didn't know what was coming. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, as the 4 cadets emerged from the corridor behind her. "And lady," she added with a nod to Nex. "Can I help you with something?" Thorax's crest was now fully extended, displaying the aggressive patterns that preceded violence in Kralian culture. "You can stop making us look like fools," he growled. "I'm not sure I understand," Maya replied, though she understood perfectly. "I completed a simulation exercise. How does that affect any of you?" "Don't play stupid," Zix hissed, her forearms flexing as she prepared for combat. "Your little performance today was designed to humiliate us." "Actually, it was designed to pass the test," Maya said. "But I can see how you might confuse the two. That was a mistake." Maya realized it as soon as the words left her mouth. She had allowed her irritation to overcome her tactical thinking, and now she could see the decision crystallizing in their eyes. Krell spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from deep within his massive chest. Time for education. They spread out in a classic encirclement pattern, cutting off her access to the maintenance bay's 3 exits. Professional, coordinated, and absolutely certain of their superiority. Maya found herself oddly grateful for their confidence. Overconfident. Opponents made predictable mistakes. "This doesn't have to happen," she said, buying time while her mind cataloged every piece of equipment within reach. "We're all Coalition cadets here." "Coalition mistake," Thora corrected. "Humans don't belong in real military." Time you learned. Maya's mining background had taught her that the most dangerous moment in any confrontation was the instant before it began. That split second when opponents committed to action but hadn't yet moved. She had learned to recognize that moment, to feel it in the subtle shift of body language and breathing patterns. The moment came as Thorak's weight shifted forward and Zix's tail coiled for a spring attack. Maya smiled. "You know what I learned growing up on an asteroid mining station?" They paused, confused by her sudden conversational tone. "I learned that when you're surrounded by things that want to kill you," Maya continued, her hand moving casually toward her tool belt. "The secret isn't being the strongest or the fastest or the most heavily armed." Krell's small eyes narrowed with suspicion. "The secret," Maya finished, "is being the one who's willing to do whatever it takes to go home." And then 12 seconds of carefully controlled chaos began. 12 seconds that changed everything. The first rule of asteroid mining: when the environment turns hostile, you don't fight it. You use it. Maya's plasma cutter was in her hand before Thorak completed his first step forward. But instead of targeting the massive Kralian, she aimed at the atmospheric processor's primary coolant line directly above his head. The superheated plasma beam sliced through the reinforced tubing in a fraction of a second, releasing a torrent of flash-frozen coolant that turned the air around Thorak into a blinding, frigid cloud. The Kralian's roar of surprise was cut short as the sudden temperature change triggered his species' natural hibernation reflexes. His massive form stumbled forward, movement sluggish as his cold-blooded physiology struggled to adapt. Second 1. Zix launched herself at Maya from the left, all 4 arms extended with razor-sharp talons that could tear through standard armor. Plating. But Maya was no longer where the Vorthic expected her to be. Using a gravitational stabilizer from her mining kit, she had magnetized herself to the nearest metal surface and swung around a support pillar like a pendulum, letting Zix's momentum carry her directly into a bank of exposed electrical conduits. Shower of sparks and the Vorthic's screech of pain told Maya that her improvised trap had worked perfectly. Zix's nervous system, hypersensitive to electrical interference, overloaded instantly. She collapsed in a twitching heap, temporarily paralyzed, but alive. Second 3. Next, seeing her twin's fate, tried a more cautious approach, using her serpentine lower body to circle around behind Maya while keeping her upper arms ready for defense. It was a sound tactical decision that would have worked against most opponents. Maya wasn't most opponents. She had spent years working in zero gravity, where every surface was a potential floor, wall, or ceiling. As Nex circled, Maya activated her gravity boots and simply walked up the side of an atmospheric processor, putting herself directly above the surprised Vorthic. The mining explosive was small, designed to crack open asteroid rock without damaging valuable ore. Against organic targets, it was decidedly non-lethal, but extremely effective at disrupting equilibrium. Maya dropped it directly onto Nex's head and activated the charge. The concussion wave knocked Nex unconscious instantly, her coiled form unraveling as she hit the deck plating with a satisfying thud. Second 6. Krell had been watching his companions fall with the calculating patience of a predator who understood that rushing into danger was the fastest way to become prey. Now, with 3 of his allies neutralized, he began his own attack with methodical precision. Heavy worlders were incredibly difficult to stop through conventional means. Their bone density was nearly twice that of standard humanoids. Their muscle fiber was designed to operate under crushing gravity, and their pain tolerance was legendary throughout the galaxy. Direct confrontation with Krell would be suicidal. Asterisk. Fortunately, Maya had no intention of fighting fair got as Krell charged across the maintenance bay, his massive feet pounding craters in the deck plating. Maya activated every gravitational stabilizer in her equipment kit simultaneously. The mining tools weren't designed to work in concert, but Maya had learned to improvise with whatever was available. The localized gravity field that resulted was chaotic and unpredictable. Krell's careful charge turned into a stumbling dance as his inner ear struggled to process conflicting gravitational inputs. His heavy world balance, so perfectly adapted to crushing gravity, became a liability in an environment where up and down kept changing. Maya helped him along with a precisely aimed plasma burst that severed the support cables for a massive atmospheric recycling unit directly above his position. The unit, weighing several tons under normal circumstances, became a controllable projectile in the distorted gravity field. Krell looked up just in time to see 2 tons of recycling equipment falling toward him at an impossible angle. His heavy world reflexes saved his life, allowing him to partially dodge the impact, but the glancing blow was still enough to send him crashing into a bank of control panels with bone-jarring force. Second 9, Thorak had finally shaken off the effects of the coolant blast, his reptilian metabolism slowly adapting to the temperature change. His crest was now displaying colors that Maya didn't recognize, probably indicating a level of rage beyond normal Krallian emotional parameters. Impossible, he snarled, his translator struggling with the subsonic frequencies of his fury. Humans are weak, humans are prey. Maya wiped a thin line of sweat from her forehead. The rapid use of her mining equipment had drained most of her power cells, and she was down to basic tools. Against a fully enraged Krallian warrior, that might not be enough. You're right, she said, backing toward the maintenance bay's main exit. Humans are weak. We're slow, we're fragile, and we don't have any natural weapons. Thorak advanced slowly, his massive claws extended and his tail lashing behind him. Then why do you still breathe? Maya's hand found the emergency maintenance lever for the atmospheric processor's main intake valve. Because we're also really good at cheating. She pulled the lever. The atmospheric processor's main function was to cycle and purify the station's air supply, a process that required moving millions of cubic meters of atmosphere every hour. The intake valve opened directly into the maintenance bay, and when Maya activated the emergency override, it began drawing air at maximum capacity. The sudden pressure differential turned the maintenance bay into a wind tunnel. Thorak, already off balance from his rage, found himself being pulled inexorably toward the massive intake vent. His claws scraped against the deck plating as he fought against the artificial hurricane, but even his impressive strength couldn't overcome the relentless suction. Maya, prepared for the pressure change and positioned near a support strut, watched as the Krallian was drawn toward what would certainly be a fatal encounter with the processor's intake fans. At the last possible moment, she reached out and grabbed his flailing arm. Second 12. The emergency override shut down automatically. As Maya's weight was added to the system's safety calculations, the wind died instantly, leaving Thorak dangling half inside the intake vent, held only by Maya's grip on his wrist. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Thorak looked up at the human who had just saved his life after defeating him in combat. Why? He asked, his translator rendering the question in barely audible tones. Maya hauled him back from the intake vent with considerable effort, her muscles straining against his considerable mass. When he was safely on solid deck plating, She sat down heavily beside him. "Because we're supposed to be on the same side," she said. The silence that followed was broken by the arrival of station security, their plasma rifles trained on the scene of destruction. Behind them came Commander Vexhai, her crystalline carapace now displaying rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. "Explain," she commanded. Maya looked around the maintenance bay. Zix was slowly regaining consciousness. Her electrical burns clearly visible, but not life-threatening. Nex was still unconscious, but breathing steadily. Krell was gradually pulling himself out of the wreckage of the control panels, and Thorak was staring at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Training exercise," Maya said simply. "We were discussing combat efficiency." Commander Vexhai's multifaceted eyes took in the scene of destruction, the improvised weapons, and the obvious signs of a very one-sided conflict. 4 against 1 is not standard training protocol, Cadet Rodriguez. "No, ma'am," Maya agreed. "But asteroid mining isn't standard combat training either. Sometimes you have to improvise." The investigation that followed was thorough and professional. Security reviewed the corridor surveillance footage leading up to the incident, interviewed witnesses, and analyzed the maintenance bay's damage patterns. The conclusion was obvious to anyone willing to see it. 4 cadets had cornered one human with the clear intention of violence, and she had defended herself with remarkable efficiency. What was not immediately obvious was the impact those 12 seconds would have on the Academy's social dynamics. Word of the incident spread through the cadet population with the speed of gossip and the accuracy of legend. Each retelling added new details, most of them wildly inaccurate, but the core facts remained consistent. The quiet human from the mining colony had taken on 4 larger opponents simultaneously and emerged victorious without suffering a single injury. Maya found herself the center of unwanted attention as she made her way through the Academy's corridors. Conversations stopped when she appeared, and cadets from species she had never interacted with nodded respectfully as she passed. It was deeply uncomfortable. More surprising was the change in her former antagonists. Thorax sought her out in the engineering lab 2 days after the incident, his crest displaying the subdued patterns that indicated formal respect in Kralian culture. "I owe you life debt," he said without preamble. "You could have let the processor take me." Maya looked up from the gravitational field equations she had been working on. "You would have done the same for me." "No," Thorak admitted. "I would not have. That is why debt exists." The concept of life debt was serious business in Kralian society. Maya had inadvertently created a bond that would influence Thorak's behavior for the rest of his life. She wasn't entirely sure how she felt about that. "Forget the debt," she said. "Just help me understand something. Why did you hate me so much?" Thorak was quiet for a long moment, his reptilian features unreadable. "Fear," he said finally. "My people are warriors. For 10,000 years, we have defined ourselves by strength in battle. But you ... you make warfare look primitive." "I'm not a warrior," Maya protested. "I'm an engineer. That is what makes you dangerous." Thorak's crest shifted to colors Maya was beginning to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Warriors fight enemies. Engineers solve problems. In your mind, we were just problems to be solved. Maya had never thought of it that way, but she could see his point. To her, the confrontation in the maintenance bay hadn't been a fight. It had been a complex, 3-dimensional puzzle with moving parts and environmental variables. She had simply found the most efficient solution. The twins, Zix and Nex, approached her a week later with a proposition that surprised everyone, including Maya herself. They wanted her to join their tactical studies group. "Your approach to problem solving is ... unique," Zix said, her translator struggling with Vorthic modulations that indicated grudging respect. We could learn from this. And what would I learn from you? Maya asked, asterisk. Nex's serpentine form coiled in what Maya was learning to recognize as amusement. How to think like a predator instead of prey. It was an interesting offer. Maya had been operating under the assumption that her mining background was a disadvantage. In military training, something to be overcome rather than leveraged. But perhaps there was value in combining different perspectives. All right, she said, but I have conditions. The study group that formed around Maya's hybrid approach to tactical thinking became legendary within the academy. They called themselves the Problem Solvers, and their unconventional methods began producing results that made the instructors take notice. Commander, Vex-High summoned Maya to her office 3 weeks after the Maintenance Bay incident. The commander's office was a marvel of Zentarian architecture, with crystalline surfaces that reflected and refracted light in patterns that seemed to shift based on the viewer's angle. Your recent performance has been exceptional, the commander began. Your tactical studies group has achieved the highest collective scores in Academy history. Thank you, ma'am. However, your individual performance remains ... concerning. Maya frowned. Her test scores had improved dramatically since forming the study group. In what way, Commander? You continue to avoid direct combat scenarios in favor of environmental manipulation and technological solutions. Some instructors question whether you have the warrior mindset necessary for military leadership. Maya considered her response carefully. With respect, Commander, I think that's exactly the mindset we need. Commander Vex-High's carapace shifted to deeper blues. Explain. The galaxy is changing. We're facing threats that can't be solved with traditional warfare. The Devourers in the Andromeda approach, the quantum storms in the Magellanic Clouds, the reality distortions around the galactic core. These aren't enemies we can fight. They're problems we need to solve. And you believe your approach is the solution? I believe diversity of thinking is the solution. Thorax warrior instincts, the twins' predatory tactics, Krell's heavy world. Resilience, my engineering background. Separately, we're each limited by our species' natural advantages. Together, we're something new. Commander Vex-High was quiet for a long time, her multifaceted eyes studying Maya with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Finally, she reached into her desk and withdrew a single insignia. Congratulations, Squad Leader Rodriguez, she said. Your first assignment is to expand your Problem Solvers group into a full tactical unit. You'll have access to advanced training, scenarios, and direct input into curriculum development. Maya stared at the insignia in her hands. Squad Leader was typically a position reserved for fourth-year cadets with exemplary records. She was barely through her first year. Commander, I'm not sure I'm ready for this level of responsibility. Neither was I when I received my first command, Commander Vex-High replied. But readiness isn't the point. Necessity is. The galaxy needs leaders who can think beyond traditional parameters, who can turn problems into solutions and conflicts into opportunities. She stood, indicating the meeting was over. Your species has a saying, I believe. Something about necessity being the mother of invention? Yes, ma'am. Then consider this your necessity, Squad Leader. Invent us a new kind of military leader. As Maya left the commander's office, insignia secured to her uniform, she reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. 3 months ago, she had been an outcast, tolerated but not accepted. Now she was being asked to reshape military doctrine for an entire academy. The responsibility was terrifying. But as she passed through corridors, filled with cadets who now looked at her with respect rather than disdain, Maya realized that terror was just another problem to be solved. And solving problems, after all, was what she did best. The Problem Solvers unit grew rapidly, attracting cadets from species across the coalition, who were drawn to Maya's unconventional approach to military thinking. They developed new tactical doctrines, created innovative training scenarios, and consistently outperformed traditional units in complex simulation exercises. More importantly, they proved that diversity of thought was not just valuable, but essential for the challenges facing the galaxy. Maya's 12 seconds in the maintenance bay had begun as a desperate fight for survival, but they had evolved into something much more significant, a demonstration that the future of warfare belonged not to the strongest or the most traditional, but to those willing to adapt, improvise, and solve problems in ways no one had ever considered before. Years later, when Maya Rodriguez was commanding her own Star Destroyer and developing tactical solutions for threats that previous generations could never have imagined, she would still remember those 12 seconds as the moment everything changed. Not just for her, but for everyone willing to accept that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to refuse to fight at all. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and full of problems that needed solving. Maya Rodriguez and her problem solvers were ready for all of them. Asterisk.